Hello, I'm Timmie,
And I'm Jeanette.
and we're here to invite you into our conversations that we have pretty much weekly that elevates our brain. And what we've done is we've come up with topics that we thought we wanted to talk about, and Jeanette's going to pick one out of our wisdom owl.
Nice. Without looking. Is that just one? No, there's two.
There you go. Okay. Stay with or sit with an uncomfortable feeling. Lean into it.
Thanks.
We've talked about this a lot.
We have talked about it a lot.
So share your thoughts first, if you'd like.
Staying with uncomfortable feelings. Let's think. For me, I think it's about finding ways to, what do you call it? Reframe. We've called it reframing, finding ways to reframe. And the main thing for me is, or has been, as far as learning about it, has been reframing what happens to me when I feel the feeling in my body. My old response is to run away from that as much as possible. So for me, I've had to work really hard at reframing what the feelings in my body mean, what they're telling me. And I think for me, that's been the biggest change that has allowed me to then lean into it.
So what I'm hearing is like, in order to really listen to it, you typically run from it. So you got to kind of slow down, sit with it, and then you can understand it a little better and lean into it.
Right, because our programmed response, I mean, for me, my programmed response has always been uncomfortable emotion, do something, or force some external change. And I think if somebody had told me to lean into it before I could really understand that I could tell myself a different story about the feeling itself, about what it felt like physically, I don't think I would have had the ability to lean that far into it. I think I would have still just ran from it. I would have still stayed away from it, or I just like to solve a problem, do something external. But when I allow myself, when I allow that, like maybe it's a feeling in your stomach that feels like you just got punched in the gut. As much as you want to move away from that, if I tell myself the story of, wait, this is just about a feeling, there's no need to run, then I can actually start to lean into it. But that was a big shift for me, was kind of that somatic, that understanding that the physical feeling and the emotion it's okay to sit in them first of all and allow them to happen. Yeah.
Can you give an example? Is there a feeling that you remember that you were like, ooh, screw this, I do not want to sit with it? And then you said, I can learn something by stopping and allowing the feeling and then lean into it a little bit more.
I think it started to shift for me when it was the sadness and the grief about my circumstances a few years ago.
So the feeling was sadness and grief.
Sadness and grief.
Okay.
And it was the first time in my life where I couldn't run.
You couldn't distract yourself?
No. I mean, it was too big. There was nothing, there was no ability to subvert or get around, or no. I mean, I tried for the first probably year and a half, almost 2 years. And then
you ran and ran and ran until you couldn't run anymore?
I did. And then it wasn't until there was nowhere to run.
So what happened when you stopped running and said, wait a second, here's a feeling I got to sit with?
I started to understand what it means to allow an emotion to move through you instead of resist. Because the first 2 years I was in complete resistance, and My health was taking hits. My every part of my life was taking a hit at that point. And when I had nowhere else to run, I started having no choice but to let the emotion come. And when I would relax around it in some fashion, I don't even know how, I don't really know even how to describe how to relax around that. Somehow you find a way to breathe when there's no breath. Somehow you find a way to sit when the only thing you want to do is exactly not that. I mean, somehow you just find a way to kind of do something that's a little bit different. And in those moments that would happen, I would actually find that it wasn't more painful like I thought it would be. It was, I don't want to say less painful, but it was manageable. There was something manageable about it when I didn't resist or push back. When I just let it, almost like wind blowing. If you let the wind blow and you kind of, you know, the willow tree or something that kind of is flexible in the wind, you find that the wind kind of blows over you, but then you're able to stand there. Versus when I was resisting it all, I truly felt like every part of me was disappearing, you know, just I couldn't withstand the wind at all. And if any little fluctuation in the current situation happened, I would lose it. I felt like I was losing my mind constantly.
That kind of reminds me of it's when I'm in situations like that, I didn't experience quite what you did with those feelings. But the experience of resisting it and running from it and distracting is so exhausting. And it's just pushing a rock up a mountain when we're distracting because we don't want to just sit with it. And I find that there's gold. There is gold. There's a treasure when we finally say, okay, there's this emotion that is trying to get my attention. I'm here. Listen to me. There's gold when we can sit and just be with it and lean into it. It's a gift, but it's so fascinating how we tend to automatically want to push against it or distract from it. And I think I'm wondering what that's okay, I do know what that's about. That's about because they're just feelings we're taught are not okay.
Right.
And when we're taught and we're experiencing a feeling that's not okay, what do we want to do? We want it gone. And we don't know how to get rid of it, so we're trying to run away from it.
Right.
Like we're running from something that, you know, is attacking us.
Right.
And that's exhausting.
It is exhausting. I agree. And it's not only exhausting, it does things to us physically. It does things beyond just
It
emotional.
settles in the body.
It does.
Yeah.
And I can really see why all those years ago, you know, I heard that dis-ease is emotionally based, you know, and I would hear those things, but the relativity wasn't quite there yet. And during this particular circumstance, I couldn't avoid any of that reality that I had been believing kind of in the background of my mind for so long. It became very apparent what was real and what was unreal, and what I could do something about and what I couldn't, because one of my biggest things was I set my life up pretending. I thought I convinced myself that I had a lot of control over my life, you know. And when you're in those life moments where the universe just shows you, control is not really a thing. I mean, it's not really something that we have any control over at all.
Especially emotions.
Yeah.
Emotions kind of flow through us. I mean, thoughts can create emotions. However, if we're not aware of our thoughts and these emotions are coming through, yeah, we need learn how to just be with them
Right.
and let it be okay that they're there. Like, there's a quote on a calendar I have at work, and it's, I'm gonna not say it correctly, but it doesn't matter, because the gist is, he said, my emotions are, um, like leaves floating in the wind on a windy day, but my breath is my anchor. And you had mentioned that you just sometimes just have to breathe into. That's part of sitting with it. Those just uncomfortable feelings is just breathing and bringing awareness to it.
Okay. Right. And allowing,
Mhm.
allowing it to be there. Again, I don't know if I was, we're in programming in that, before we're 7 years old, in that hypnotic state that we're in brain wise. I suppose we are taught, I'm going to put that in quotes, taught, accidentally, that emotions aren't allowed.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
in the same sense, we're taught that by people who are at a life stage where they don't really have access to them anyway. So
Yeah.
that there was no,
They're running from them
yeah,
themselves.
yeah, there was no
They're not
way,
leaning into them. So
right?
don't you have that feeling, because I can't lean
I can't
into
deal with
it.
it.
So I
Yeah.
don't want you to have that in front of my face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then you think about how, the outer world mirrors everything, and I can see why our parents were kind of afraid of us and afraid of our emotions, because of course we're mirroring back to them everything that they don't want to deal with.
Right.
And you're not you're not taught, I guess you're just not taught to accept that all emotions are valid. Everybody's kind of always looking for the feel good stuff, and when they're in the what doesn't feel good, it's not just resistance, it's more like there's this fear that life is not working properly. It's not just a resistance to a negative emotion. And from that perspective, yeah, none of us are going to really want to be in a negative emotion at all. We're going to do everything we can not to be there. So,
Well, something I find interesting about some of the things you said is, first off, there's feel good emotions and not feel good emotions. But I was also taught sometimes that you're too excited, you're
right,
too happy.
right,
So some of those even feel good emotions we weren't even allowed to feel. It was
right,
almost like, ooh, that's too much on the scale of happiness. You need to bring it down a little bit. You're too excited. Go settle down.
right,
Or men were accepted to, kids were accepted to, were able to feel anger, but not cry. Males. Females, they weren't allowed to get angry, but they were allowed to cry. That's another thing that I find fascinating about this whole thing about emotions.
right. Exactly. And from there, how do we even before we talk about how to lean into it, how
Mm-hmm.
do we just switch the thought process
Mm-hmm.
that says, first of all, there are no negative emotions, because
Right.
emotions are just something talking to you, telling you how you're doing.
Right.
If we just saw it as that, this is a communication system that's saying
Like a
this is,
GPS system. This
yeah,
is what you're feeling right now.
this
This
is
is where you're at.
how you're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like taking a wrong turn. If you were to take a wrong turn in a car, you would know, maybe in a block or two, okay, I can turn again and get back on track.
Right.
But in a negative emotion perspective, we have a little negative emotion and we go off the cliff, because we can't allow
Mm-hmm.
for a course correct at the, what does the GPS
Oh,
system say, at the nearest possible
make a
U-turn?
U-turn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Versus nothing's gone off the rail. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a momentary divergence, I suppose, from your original path.
Mm-hmm.
As at your earliest convenience, you can get back on track. I mean, if we
Mhm.
could see negative emotions as something such as that, how much more would we be able to allow? How much more would we be able to lean into if we just saw it as something as simple as that, you know?
Just like a meter reading,
Yeah,
like the gas tank, it's low gas. It's just telling us, it's just a meter telling us, fill your car up with gas.
right.
You're feeling angry. It's telling us something. Let's sit with it and lean into it and see what it's saying
Yeah, exactly.
rather than try and run away from it.
Right. And most of us wouldn't have a clue what that little thing right there would do for our lives in a big picture scheme, because our negative emotions just haven't been treated that way. You know, we just haven't even tried that. Whereas, geez, I mean, how good could it get? I don't know. I don't know. But it'd be fun trying out. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel complete on that subject for now. How about you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it for now. We'll invite you into our next conversation. I don't know when that's going to be, but we'll see you then.